So well, I could spend like 30 minutes introducing the next speaker, but unfortunately it's me. So let me tell you a short story about, well, actually why I'm doing Erlang and how I landed here, so how I came to Erlang and why I will stay there forever. Well, as long as Erlang exists, of course. So, just a brief introduction. I'm Pavlo. I probably only live on Twitter at the moment, but not that often. I also write books, which is a hobby, and whoever tried to write a book will know that this is a hobby. But anyway, I also wrote all of them are German, so I also wrote an Erlang OTP book, a German one. I will explain why, because John Paul introduced you to the great literature, and I'm getting asked this question all the time, and I have an explanation here. The current one is something for IT decision makers. Probably there is no single IT decision maker, a real IT decision maker I aim with this book and this audience today. So, but anyway, it's also half technical here. This one is, well, actually, even if it's German, it's 80% Erlang code, so anybody is welcome to read it. Okay, so this whole thing began somewhere in the 70s as I learned tinkering, right? Somewhere in the sandbox, playing around and tinkering things together. And, well, I'm not the greatest speaker, so the natural speaking, it's not really my thing. And so sometime later, I just discovered the most expressive language around that I could imagine. So I started hacking this thing, and I was programming, well, actually for money. I was programming weird printer drivers and stuff like that. Well, and then at some point, I guess I was just growing up, and I realized there is C around, right? It's a cool thing. So I also started hacking C. It's a story, right? So you just can enjoy the slides. Well, C was cool, right? And I did a lot of C programming as well. I was still doing C programming. But anyway, the puberty was over. I was like 18, maybe. And said, hey, there's a higher level programming possibility. So let's do some C++. So you can you can imagine what comes next. So the next big thing, well, I actually started late with that, somewhere by the end of the 90s. It was this Java, enterprise Java stuff. It was rolling on, and it was advancing, and it was, well, it just wanted to conquer the world, right? And so, well, I just jumped in for the money. I mean, I'm honest, right? There are people who are not honest about this, but I did it for the money. I still do it for the money. It's okay. I still need some bread and some butter. So yeah, I loved coding Java at this moment. So any Java developers around? Okay, just two now. You don't need to be so shy. So actually, what it does, it just loads a shared library, and it's GNI, and it natively imports a function. I can call it, and I could do assembly in there, right? Well, this is just a side story here. Somewhere in the middle of 2000s, however you call it, someone came around and asked me to program a tiny footprint database for these Palm PDAs. Do you remember these things, right? Different ones, and you have Code Warrior, like for compiling for different platforms there, like 3 or 4 of them. Whatever, Sony had its own one, and HP had its own one, so slightly incompatible. So anyway, I just found myself programming again in C, and I had memory like 64 kilobyte, because you couldn't, from the shared library there, how it's built, you couldn't really access, in a performant way, you couldn't access the card memory. So I just had to program that with a weird port of zlib and whatever. So, but enterprise Java was, of course, the place where money lived, sure. I think it's still that way. So I was working for a company and my job titles were like enterprise architect and whatever architect and whatnot architect. So at some point somebody came around and we did some financial calculation. So I have interest calculator. What would an interest calculator do? Well, you have 11 or 13 iterations where I try to iterate over a set of options in order to find the best interest for the customer. And actually, people didn't know at that point that they could parallelize different calculations. You cannot split this iteration process, but you can calculate based on different options, so you can parallelize this. So somebody came around and said, hey, there is an interest calculator, and let's try it out. We have a Java platform, let's take it. So the next thing was, what the fuck is that? I mean, it's written in C. Yeah? And it doesn't do parallel calculation at all. So this is an issue. So the question was, of course, on the architecture level in the enterprise Java world, should we do some messaging, some message-driven beans and JMS and whatnot? So here the official bullshit part of this presentation is over. And the idea of the first slides was that I'm also always looking for the best solution on the lowest level, which is possible, which is still comfortable. And I'm not afraid of hacking in C and whatever, if it solves the problem. So what I did for this interest calculation stuff, I spent 3 months of my life, mostly at night, researching Erlang. I just didn't do Erlang by that time, so I just wanted to dig into it and learn about it. And concept after concept, I just realized, hey, cool, it can help. It can help parallelizing this weird C code that I had there. It actually could. On one machine, on several machines. I did a lot of tests. Then I went to, in a big enterprise, if you work for a big enterprise, you have like fences and fences all around. And one way to work together is just throw over the fence something. And the other way to work together is actually go over the fence and try to convince people to use something. Well, I'm in front of these ops guys, right? And those ops guys are telling me, hey, it's not Java, we don't take it. I mean, look at people like Martin Thompson. Those know what is Java programming. For many solutions, they don't even use the standard library because it's too fat. So you can do real cool stuff on the JVM, but they didn't know it, they didn't care about it. It's just a comfort zone, right? They didn't take it. Okay, so I could just say, fuck it, forget it. Or what I did is I just started learning Erlang more and more. It was difficult because you don't have a real project for that, so you need to implement something out of your head and experiment with that. I just started to learn, and at some point I just said, hey, what is the best way for Pavlo to learn things? I'm not into speaking, I'm not into, being verbose in any way. So the best way for me to learn things was writing books. I have 4 of them out there. And whenever you write a book, the first page, you start with the first page, you realize you have no idea about this topic. Really. Even if you have a contract with a publisher. Even if you did a lot of talks about this, you have absolutely no fucking idea about what you want to write about. So you have to learn this stuff. So this one took 2.5 years of effort to write. Starting real from scratch, because I realized that what I learned about Erlang and what I want to write about Erlang are 2 different things. By the way, I have 3 copies with me three copies with me. Do we have a German speaker? Any German speakers here around?
No, I think, but not
well, remember it's 80% Erlang, right? So first three guys who will appear at this table by the end of this talk will get the book. I'll make it very simple. You can do it in a concurrent way, if you like. However, I will not take these copies with me. So, yeah, it's absolutely worth it, because I learned a lot of things about this platform. And I just looked deeper and deeper, and well, it's I will explain some experiences. So what I also did is just talking to people who never heard about this, who even thought that Erlang is actually a wrongly written name of a German city. Some of them actually also knew that this is a great mathematics stuff. It's a measure unit for traffic, actually, if even network traffic or car traffic. So anyway, so I went to German user groups. I will not tell this one. I will not tell about these experiences again. Well, actually, they liked it. Most of them really liked it. I didn't offend anybody. I just showed some interesting stuff, and I did live hacking. So I was in front of my Emacs, even if you don't like Emacs, I do. I was in front of my Emacs and just hacking around and showing how it works, and was an interesting experience. So let me tell you about things that have changed after I've learned about Erlang during this 2.5 years, and after that, every day. Because right now I'm also doing Erlang programming. I'm not doing the Erlang programming all the time, but for some cases I have to do, like working with React or RabbitMQ. If you want to go deep into this, you will have to write plugins, you will have to write your own hooks and whatever. So anyway, just look at this line. Sitting in front of your Java code and you start typing and you start to compile this, or even the background compilation in Eclipse, whatever. So it didn't compile. But it's a way of thinking. What actually happened is that I did some functional programming before, but it was, during the studies, it wasn't very serious. I didn't have use cases for that yet, or at least by that time. So what happened to me now, I don't even want to touch a language that doesn't have list comprehensions and lambdas. I don't want to touch it. It's just too verbose for me. I'm not into this high-end functional thinking, but I'm learning every day, and I see the concepts. I see how I can use these concepts, and there are languages around that don't have it. One of them I've even mentioned. And also, for example, even if Python has lambdas and list comprehensions, this is a cool language, I use it a lot. But anyway, pattern matching. You know about pattern matching. You just describe how things will come into function in a very declarative way. This is a perfect thing. This is something that I miss. I can completely avoid lots of ifs and thens and whatever. I just have a declarative way to describe what will happen when something arrives. So what actually also happened to me is Erlang made my code better in any language. It just helped me a little thinking concurrently, thinking distributedly, whatever. I'm into distributed systems. I started this stuff and I tried to build some with them with different technologies. Erlang was the first one where I say, hey, the distribution, well, it has its price, of course. It always has its price. This is a sort of implementation where I can start with 30-40% of things that are prepared for me, and I can concentrate on the rest. So making the code better means that I don't reassign variables. I don't reassign them Absolutely. I also work with deep copies, just to avoid any side effects, in any language I use. I started using recursion. This is pretty weird, because people who are, well, comfortable with loops and stuff will look at my code saying, why do you use recursion here? Why this effort? And I'm like, this is a way of thinking that prepares you for things that are not imperative, that are more natural for you to understand, to get when you look at the code. I also cut everything into very small pieces, like functions, methods, whatever. It is more parallelizable. The concept, the basic idea behind Erlang and Erlang's let it crash principle and so on and so forth, you just cut your program into small pieces. Everything that is parallelizable is just a small piece of code, and you can spawn it as a process. You still have to take care of forks and joins and whatnot. But anyway, this is a different way of thinking, and I'm using it in different languages as well. What also happened to me, I really judge a platform when I look at it by one simple thing. Can I fire up, can I spawn 2 to the 27, well, theoretically, actors on it and pass asynchronous messages between them? This is a very good question, because there are definitely use cases when you need such a platform. And when you start programming into small pieces, you will have more and more and more processes. And the Erlang VM is a real great thing for what it does with the actors, because of schedulers, because of this reduction-based time sharing and so on and so forth. So it's not really for number crunching and things like that. It's for extremely parallel systems. What also happened to me, for example, when I look at Zookeeper, you know Zookeeper? When I have a look at Zookeeper, and I touched Zookeeper a couple of times during the last year, well, yes, it is a distributed system. It implements a couple of things that are normal, that are typical for distributed systems. It tries to solve these problems. But the question that I always ask looking at that is like, why the fucking reinvent the wheel? I mean, you really have Erlang there with its built-in distribution. You can build on it. Okay, so for very specific use cases, such as messaging, distributed data management, especially, when I look at the Erlang-based technology, it just gets more credit from the beginning for me, because I know that it builds upon, well, an implementation which is solid, which is proved, and very many people have tried it out and are implementing their own technologies based on it. So you need to take it, you want to take it. What also happened to me is I met some real smart people in the community, around the community as well. I mean, starting with people like Francesco, Joe, and Robert, or John Hughes, or Crescentor, or Steve Vinoski. All of these guys are, well, not only smart, but they know that Erlang is a very specific thing for very specific problems. And of course, Erlang is not perfect. Things will get really dirty, really hairy when you try to debug problems in the distributed systems, in a distributed system which is not per se a problem of Erlang. It's a problem of the complexity. Or whenever you get down to an if, it will get dirty if you don't know what you do there. But anyway, to be honest, I didn't see a perfect technology yet. I just didn't. So it's all based on the same concepts. It's like implementing this part of the concepts, that part of the concepts, whatever. Erlang, in my opinion, is just aiming very specific use cases, and it's the only considerable platform to implement those. So now, I have Erlang, the whole thing. I have it in my toolbox. Well, it's a precise machine. It's a real good thing, but it's very sensitive to doing things wrong. Well, everything is, but you know, in the other world, you can hide behind ORM frameworks, whatever, and just say, hey, ops guys, you need to solve this performance problem. You're just down to the bare metal. You're responsible for everything. So you can really kill things if you want. But I'm glad I learned this. And this is the main message here. So even if you just, well, not sure, should I not, attending this one, or anybody around, you should really, even if you will not do Erlang programming for a living, you will learn a lot from the platform, how the platform is implemented. You might or might not like the language itself, if you didn't do Prolog, the syntax itself, but anyway, the concepts, the abstractions over real low-level things, they are great, in my opinion. So that's basically my experience here. Thank you very much. So do you have any questions on this, well, probably, once again, non-typical talk?
How did the deployment problem change? You find it easier nowadays to tell I have here some Erlang code?
How can you define now? Does it depend on a release or?
Yeah, if you write a new application server and you say, okay, we're going to do it in Erlang, and you have some operation team who say, well, we don't want to have it.
Oh well, yeah, I understand the question. Okay, so what has happened is Erlang comes to companies as an absolutely necessary platform. I mean, there are many use cases where you will not come around, you will not be able to avoid Rabbit or React or things like that. And the price you pay for that is you have to know Erlang. You have to know how to operate on it. It starts with reading the logs. I mean, in the current project, I've experienced people looking at the logs and saying, what is that? My eye just catches within a millisecond what is wrong there. And since they finally introduced line numbers, but I didn't need them before as well. You probably know where to search for, where to look for. So I wouldn't say it's easier now, but the necessity is bigger. And those implementations building on top of Erlang are doing a great job for that. The guys are smart, the guys are real experts, they know how to use it. Some more work needs to be done to push it into enterprises, but I think it's just a matter of probably 2-3 years before they realize, hey, there are technologies around we cannot avoid, and we have to work with them. And as I said, the price you pay for that is Erlang. So whenever you go to an enterprise customer and make a big React installation, whatever, take care of teaching them Erlang, because otherwise they will hate you. Any other questions?
How do you feel about the limitations that John was pointing to, like the string world,
Yeah.
the time world?
Yes. I wouldn't, if you like, just get yourself the copy of the book. It talks about the limitations as well. I have a whole example there with calendar and how much it sucks. So actually, what you don't want to build upon, maybe some people will disagree with it, but you will not build a classic enterprise application on Erlang. You will build a messaging system on Erlang. You will build a chat engine on Erlang. You will probably build the first mile, the first connection point for your web application and go behind the scenes. This is my honest opinion. But other people are doing also a great job in simplifying those things as well. So yes, I'm very absolutely aware of limitations. And you need to deal with them whenever you touch them. But probably what was interesting in John Paul's talk is you can avoid them. You know, you need to avoid them because what you buy with Erlang, the distribution, the massive parallelism, it's just too tasty not to try it out. And even if the price for that is a little bit of string handling there, so probably you will find a solution for that. But I know it's difficult, you know. But I really don't see a point to re-implement a whole complex distributed system in Java, for example, right now. There is a couple of them around. They are pretty cool. But anyway, I'm not into reinventing the wheel. You should just use what is around. There are much more limitations, trust me. It's like, but any single thing in this technical world has its limits, right? It's not a fully purpose library. It's not a full purpose ecosystem that you could use for programming any possible solution.
But do you think it could evolve into something that would be able to deal with the string world too? Because the string world is just not going to go away. And of course you could limit yourself saying like, yeah, it's just good for messaging. But at every point in time you can come into the situation that you really have to deal with strings, and then just skipping your language and skipping to something completely different doesn't really help, because you still have all the other necessities.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's an interesting point. I think that what has happened actually is that this development of using Erlang for things that Erlang wasn't originally thought for, it just has completely overhauled the developers, the maintainers. And for example, Basher did a great job in pushing new stuff into that because you just need some more, just need some more fat, just need some more bacon on top of your bones. And I think it will evolve, but I'm not really involved into this development process. I'm just a user of the platform. So in order to have this platform distributed, spread more widely around the world, I think those pretty simple things should change, really. But right now you have to deal with them. This is the current situation. Probably just go to GitHub, just check out the code, just sign the contract, and you can try to change this.
Yeah, I think it has to change somehow. I mean, there's this unique notion that everything is a file. There seems to be this Erlang notion that everything is a telephone exchange. And it will not work out in the end.
Well, yeah, it depends. Again, it depends. I mean, it's when you deal with massive concurrency, real massive concurrency. You don't have like 4 actors that exchange messages, but you cannot predict how many you have like millions of them. Things will get real hairy. So this is a very good fit from when you try to project the telephone and network thinking onto this problem and try to solve it with this means. But it's not only about that. I think it just needs more reusable implementations on top of it that others can use. It should do a better job probably for the beginners to get in, because you set up the environment and you start Erlang programming probably after 2 weeks if you just read the book and that's it. But you didn't touch the VM yet. He didn't touch like 100,000 different switches there. He didn't touch them. He didn't yet understand what are the patterns. You need to understand the patterns in your program. Probably have one single process that gets flooded with messages. So you can tinker the queue and whatever. It's a little bit complex. It's just coming from different use cases. Probably there is a way to combine this with something different for string manipulation or whatever, just web applications, because those people will not get that deep into the problems. But from the historic point of view, this was necessary, and it's still necessary for you if you build a real complex system on top of Erlang.
Just one remark for people who are coming from web applications and want some improvement regarding scriptability, string manipulation, for example. You should definitely check out Elixir. You can use it basically like it's an Erlang library, maybe not the tiniest library, but you can use it just for one small, tiny concern and embed it in your Erlang application. And it still improves very much on that. It's not about the syntax, changing Erlang syntax. The point of Elixir is about having a better API, introducing, making things more straightforward, introducing some more still pretty stable concepts into the language, and making it less painful. It's still early days, but you should definitely check it out. It improves this conference.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. I didn't check out Elixir, so Yuri Rashkovsky pushed me a couple of times into that. But anyway, I will check it out. I just need some time for that. But probably some things behind the scenes also need to get better, or to get more open, extendable, and so on and so forth. This is not a general purpose platform. You should be really aware about it. But in the modern world of big data, however you call it, of things like that, it's I just didn't mention in my big data book everything about big data. Just the big data term was like every single time mentioned about 1,000 times, and it's like all the time. I don't like this term at all. It just says nothing about this. So anyway, you deal with a lot of different data patterns, how data arrives, how you have to process it. At some point, you will end up using Erlang for some use cases, or an Erlang-based technology. You will.
I have a question to use the Erlang concepts in other languages. You said use recursion rather than loops. Why?
Oh, just for fun.
Just to run out of stack memory?
No, well, I mean, yes, of course, if you're on the JVM, you'll end up not having a tail recursion optimization, whatever. But when your base case works, it's fine. But, well, you're absolutely right. It's a fun comment there. I try to use recursion for things that I can predict are not endless. What I wouldn't use is, for example, Guava for pseudo-functional programming in Java on the JVM, because actually I did several talks on that. The code you end up with is longer actually than the imperative variant, and the question is why. It should get shorter. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, I think we have a break right now, right? So don't you remember about this concurrent book, how getting thing, 3 persons in front of the table? Thank you very much again. Well, this is unfair. There you go. Thank you.